Welcome everyone and good evening. My name is Ashley Studholme, the Executive Director with the Prince William Conservation Alliance. This program regarding the proposed developments along Vint Hill will be recorded, and in fact we're recording now, so we will upload this to our YouTube channel for anyone to come back and review at a later time. So just very quickly, we're the Prince William Conservation Alliance. We are a grassroots environmental nonprofit working to create equitable and sustainable communities throughout Prince William County. And we do that through advocating for environmental friendly policies and creating opportunities for residents to engage in decisions that impact the quality of their lives and their future of their communities. And if you want to learn more about us and the work that we do, you can go to our website at pwconserve.org, where you can find out about all the activities and the events that we are involved with at this time. And also you can go to our calendar page and find out all of the fun events that we have planned. So coming up this Sunday, for example, we have a mushroom walk at Conway Robinson Forest, and then you can save the date for our annual Prince William Native Plant Symposium on February 14th. And we will have additional events between, this Sunday and February, but this is what we have planned currently. So you can mark your calendars for that. So I'm just going to quickly jump into the program tonight. I'll be providing some welcome, and Supervisor Gordy is here with us to provide opening remarks. Then I'll pass it over to Elizabeth Ward from the Sustainability Commission and Green Risks, who will discuss development in the watershed, in our drinking water watershed. And then we'll pass it over to Vint Carroll, who is with the Civic Association, CABSA, who will give an overview of the Vint Hill, the proposed development that's occurring there. During these presentations, we'll wait until the end for a Q&A, but if something occurs to you, feel free to use the chat and I will circle back and provide and go back through those questions when we open it up for the Q&A. And I don't think we have I guess the other thing is to please keep yourselves muted during the presentations. And also, if your internet stability isn't great, then you can also put your video off, and that might help with things as well. So I'm just going to quickly jump in and provide a little bit of an overview here. We are, obviously we're a conservation organization here in Prince William County, and I always like to say that conservation and smart growth is regionally significant here in Prince William County. And the reason for that is that we're one of the only localities within the Chesapeake Bay that span tidal wetlands to a mountain at Bull Run. So we have a lot of really diverse ecosystems right here in our own backyard. When you look at a regional map, we really hold the line of suburban and urban expansion that's radiating out from the urban core. So that means the development decisions that we make here in Prince William County is really regionally significant to how the entire region is developing. And of course, we can boast a lot of protected land, including 2 national parks and Marine Corps base Quantico, which is really significant to the the vibrancy of our economy, and also just the land that is protected here in our backyards. And we have the Occoquan Reservoir, which we'll get into later on today, which is a significant drinking water resource for up to 1 million residents throughout the region, including us, like me, living on the eastern end of Prince William County. We rely on this drinking water resource. And the health of the watershed is, the health of the reservoir is reflected in the health of the watershed. And then, of course, we have Quantico Creek, which is one of the highest quality streams in the region. And that's because it's protected by Prince William Forest Park and some of the lower density rural area. So I wanted to spend, since a lot of this proposal is what is referred to as conservation residential, I wanted to take a moment and reflect on the staff, the recommendation document that they prepared in 2019. And there's a lot of information here, but I did pull out just briefly the conservation residential piece, since that's a lot of what we're going to be discussing here. And just to highlight this section here, that it was recommended that the rezoning also requires the buffer around the entire property be restricted so that no sewer easements or crossing of any kind is permitted within the buffer area, effectively creating a permanent green obstacle to sewer extension into rural areas. The 60% of open space will be placed in permanent conservation easement and be located adjacent to the rural area. Now, of course, we technically in the new comp plan do not have a rural area designation, but we do have the ag and forestry land designation, and the AAOD, which is the Ag and Arts Overlay District. When we look at this further within their recommendations, the staff recommendations, we have these two categories of the agricultural and forest rural character, which is 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, and then the another category, which is a little bit more dense at 1 unit per 3 acres. I don't know why I'm not advancing here. Okay. And then part of their recommendations is a list of the development standards, and a couple that I wanted to highlight is a minimum lot area of 1 acre, provided the overall density does not exceed what I just mentioned, which was that 1 to 5 or 1 to 3, depending on the use. And that a minimum 50-foot buffer goes along the perimeter of the cluster development. And that the greatest amount of open space is really between, what that development is and the adjacent A1 lands. And then the conservation easement that was referenced previously to really limit and protect the rural character of the area. So I should say that what was recommended by staff was not officially adopted, but it does give us a little bit of an insight of what the intention was for conservation residential. When the comp plan was updated and this designation was created, this is the language that is pulled from the comp plan. So we have the conservation residential that is characterized by housing types that are smaller than the conventional rural and suburban homes. So it's on smaller lots. And then what I also wanted to, and this was additional information. So we have this total target residential density of 1 dwelling per 2 acres, or 2 dwelling units per acre. And the other part that I wanted to point out is for the staff recommendations, it had a corresponding zoning language, which we do not have. So they're implementing zoning using these current zoning districts. And it spans quite a range of density. And so I just wanted to point out that the PMR is not, is an option, but it's not the only one. And lastly, just to frame the conversation, I wanted to remind us of the letter that the Fairfax Water provided during the discussion before the comprehensive plan was updated. And so this was in response to the comprehensive plan update and the digital gateway and the data center opportunities overlay district. And their recommendation was to, before making these decisions, to run the model that had been developed and that we paid for to help inform some of these decisions that were being made, especially the comprehensive plan update. And of course, it was decided that we would do the model, but not before these decisions were made. And my understanding is that that model has been complete, and I'm hoping to provide a community presentation early next year. So in response to a lot of the development that is occurring throughout the county, before I jump into that. And then on top of the protection of the reservoir, there's also this question on well water and this increase of impervious surface on our aquifer and our groundwater, and the relationship of development in our in protecting those water resources as well. So in the face of all of this, I did want to just briefly plug that we have developed a smart growth vision for Prince William County, which we're calling the 3 R's of reaching our potential: reimagine, reinvest, and redevelop. And it's really an opportunity to look at redevelopment options throughout Prince William County to meet our growth needs, especially where in increased density in areas that are closer to infrastructure, including mass transit. And so if you want to explore that a little bit further, you can go to pwconserve.org/3Rs, and that's 3RS lowercase. So that just provides a little bit of the context and an overview from our point of view. And I am going to pass it over to Supervisor Gordy for opening remarks. So if you just want to unmute and come in, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, do you hear me okay? See everything okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Prince William Conservation Alliance. Ashley teed up perfectly when you're talking about the 3 R's: the reimagine, the reinvest, and the redevelop. You know, when I was on the Planning Commission, we went through and we dealt with the comp plan. And it was very interesting. The comp plan that we have today is very different from the comp plan that passed the Planning Commission. There were a lot of things added, particularly the C-res developments along Vint Hill Road were added at late hours of the morning at the board level. Nonetheless, we have this comprehensive plan. And from that comprehensive plan, the developers immediately jumped into submitting applications. So, and just in terms of trying to understand the aggressiveness of this, the Brentsville district Out of the nearly 150 planning cases in Prince William County, nearly 60 of them are in Brentsville. So, and that includes everything from residential to some commercial, but also data centers. So within that context, we've been trying to work to bring some sanity to this process, to recognize the fact that particularly along areas that we recognize the fact that we're going to grow and we need to grow. So, and that concept of redevelopment, and particularly as we look at the Sudley corridor, is an area that we have a great potential to meet our housing growth, but we're trying to also be very strategic about that, because right now in Prince William County, we're losing our young people. Our 22 to 45-year-old age group is declining, and according to economists, as that age group goes, so goes your local economy. And we're already starting to see some pressures on some of our shopping centers in the Brentsville district of losing tenants, which then causes them to have to reduce their rents and lease rates, which then attracts lower tier type of retailers and operations. Those are things that we're trying to prevent from happening. We're trying to keep our higher end retailers. But we have to create that sense of density in the right places in order to make that work. And that's why we're really focusing on that Sudley corridor. Now, as you know, Amazon owns the 2 biggest undeveloped parcels over there because they want to put data centers there. But they're not going to be able to get data centers there. They just simply do not have the votes. And so we are starting to see them back off and to move away from pursuing those. I've actually already had some developers come in and talk about the Compton site, the old Lewis farm right next to the Manassas Mall. And so, you know, when we think about the opportunity to get after that 22 to 45-year-old, that's a perfect place to be able to get after reaching that target age group in terms of our development. We talk about reinvesting and we talk about reimagining. You know, for the past 40 years, in Western Prince William County, we've literally built neighborhoods and shopping centers, but we didn't build a single community. And every neighborhood is balkanized into itself. But there's no place for us as a community to be able to come together. We usually have to use a school, but even now the schools are making that even more difficult for us to be able to get into and to use them for meeting space. But as Elena just popped up in the chat, when you take a look at something like Manassas Mall and you begin to reimagine, and then you begin to think about, okay, how do we take that and instead of just building more housing and more retail, what about making it basically a downtown? How we make that what you would find in any community, a place that the community comes together. So by doing that, what we're doing is showing a different vision, a reimagining of what development could be in Western Prince William County. Granted, we are still living underneath this comp plan, but I've been in conversations with a couple of my colleagues, and we are looking at potentially reopening the comp plan to make some adjustments to really align to a different type of vision going forward. And so when you think about what you're doing as the Conservation Alliance, that's going to be absolutely critical, because as we think about what's happening along Vint Hill Road, and we've had people come in for proposals beyond Vint Hill that don't align to the comp plan, and we've shut them down. But it doesn't stop them from coming. And it may not stop them from necessarily putting in an application. But they know from a standpoint that if it's not in the comp plan, we've got enough. We've got enough to deal with just within what's in that comp plan. So when we look at specifically the Vint Hill corridor, because it did not go through a long-range land use planning, because again, it was added during the board meeting. I did issue a directive to create a small area plan for the corridor. Now, unfortunately, as we all know, these applications were all in before the small area plan was initiated. So they're not necessarily going to be held to that. However, I have been able to get the developers to agree to a plan that helps us accomplish a few things. One is that instead of being like along Linton Hall corridor, where every neighborhood has its own landscape, its own design, its own fencing, that what you see on Vint Hill Road will all be the same. It will be as if you're driving by one farm all along Vint Hill Road. And so that you don't see, it doesn't seem like this balkanized approach to development. I've asked them to maintain a rural character, and we're not going to be putting red lights on roads, on Vint Hill Road, at the intersections. There will be those that the traffic circles. There will be things that keep traffic moving, but also does not turn this into a full-on suburban type thing like you would find on Linton Hall Road. Protecting Kettle Run. That is a big priority for me personally. And so if you look at the applications, the Burnside Farm will go under conservation easement. They have a lot of frontage along Kettle Run. And then with the Hawthorne development, I'm sorry, the Alderwood development also has a major conservation easement along Kettle Run that will actually continue to be farmed. I asked them to protect our current agricultural activities in the area. Now, for those of us who live out here, I mean, I've got 2 roosters that start crowing at about 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't need somebody calling the police complaining about my roosters. So we recognize the fact that agriculture and development, in a residential development, are not compatible uses. People put manure on their fields and it doesn't smell well. The farmers are cutting hay 3 times a year. That kicks up allergens. You have tractors that go up and down the roads at 15 miles per hour. And there's a few country songs about that and what that looks like. And so it really is about people having to understand, you move here, you're moving into an agricultural area. And so that's why in one of the neighborhoods, it literally has an agricultural activity that will remain as part of the community. Tree save areas. We talk about groundwater. There is no better place for groundwater recharge than in forested areas. So our county staff has been working very hard to ensure that we maintain as much tree save as we possibly can. And then looking at preservation of open space. And so these are the things that we've been working on and looking at. And again, because none of this was evaluated from a long-term land use planning. So we're having to build the car as it's, drive the car as it's being built, just because of the way the planning process has to unfold and the way that it works. Looking forward, as I talked about this next comp plan, this is where we've got to, we need that strategic approach. The current comp plan, to me, it was a developer's wish list. But going forward, we've got to have a more strategic approach. And I think we now have support amongst board members to listen to how we can create that balance between putting development in areas where it makes sense, where the infrastructure exists, rather than continuing to push out where the development is going to just get more expensive. Because the roads, once you get beyond Vint Hill, you don't have roads that you can widen. You've got dirt roads. You've got roads with that cross Kettle Run with just culverts that flood during different periods of the year. So the cost of infrastructure is just going to continue to go up. And so it doesn't make sense, if you're trying to also get to housing affordability, to continue to push out. Now, I've heard a couple of my colleagues already starting to talk about, we just got to continue to get back to their old mantra. And that since the Bristow campus case was denied, they're starting to fall back on their old positions. However, we've got a few folks that are listening, and they're willing to work with us. And because of that, I'm going to be putting in a directive that goes back to exactly what you were talking about, Ashley, to establish an agricultural reserve that will do a few things. Number one, it'll protect Quantico. This morning, I was talking to the colonel at Quantico, and they are very concerned about the back area along, Cedar Run and all that area back there. They're very concerned about that. There are REPI grants that can help us with that. We also have to protect Kettle Run, Cedar Run, and Broad Run. We've got to, in order to maintain or to protect the Occoquan Reservoir. You all may know that it's going to cost us $500 million to clean up the Occoquan as it is today. So we can either continue to make poor choices like we did in the past, or we can make better choices going forward to ensure that we don't have to spend that money again in the future. So we're going to be working with you guys. The door is open to have conversations. Thank you, Elena. The AAOD, that's the basis for this ag reserve and the rural preservation study. Those will be the two things. I'm not asking for a new study. Take what we've already done, create the ag reserve, and let's get this done in 6 months. That's going to be my ask. So I'll leave it at that, and look forward to the presentations and some questions later on. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Supervisor. Okay, then we will transition over to Elizabeth. Now you can share your screen and your presentation with us again, and we'll talk development and the impact to our drinking water watershed. Elizabeth, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
So I'm here to talk about development impacts on drinking water, which is really development impacts on all water. Prince William County is really promoting regressive land use policies and practices, those from the last century, when we did not know that all water is connected. Increased development in the Occoquan watershed, as seen in the outlines for this Vint Hill small area plan, will increase paved surfaces and runoff, decrease forested and agricultural land that allows groundwater to recharge and store water. The result will be an increase in salinity, chemical and sediment contamination, and a decrease in stream flow in the Occoquan watershed. Since 2001, we have added all the red impervious areas here. From 2014 to 2021, Prince William County has lost almost 2,000 acres of trees, all the time swearing that they're going to save trees and preserve existing old growth trees. We still don't know how many they've knocked down in the past 5 years. So let's talk about what they're really talking about doing here. It's likely that drinking water for the development in the small area plan will come from the Western water system. That's the pink area of Prince William water. It's supplied primarily from the Potomac River via Fairfax water from the Corvallis plant. Prince William water also draws from Lake Manassas for the Western system. And that's just up the road at the top of Kettle Run and Broad Run. So The drinking water for the eastern portion of the county, the gray area and the blue area, all come from the Occoquan Reservoir via Fairfax Water's Griffith plant, which serves the customers of Prince William Water, Eastern Distribution System, and American Water, which supplies Daly City. So let's take a look at the Occoquan. Here we are, the Occoquan watershed. Notice anything interesting? Prince William County is 44% of the Occoquan watershed, but more importantly, the Occoquan watershed is more than 2/3 of Prince William County's land. Decisions made in Prince William County will impact all the customers of Fairfax Water and nearby users of groundwater. To properly protect the Occoquan watershed and the regional water supply, you need to know what the impact of development will be. The Occoquan watershed model, which Ashley referred to before, was developed over decades as our knowledge increased to evaluate what the impact of land use changes will be on the Occoquan Reservoir. Northern Virginia Regional Commission asked each of the participating entities in the Occoquan watershed to kick up the money, and they have finally run the model. And as Ashley stated, sometime at the end of the year, they're going to provide the results. The inputs were given by the county. I don't know, what the inputs they're giving. Like, is it the comprehensive plan? Is it what they're actually doing? What about all the development that's been approved outside of the comprehensive plan? So I'm really not sure what that will be. But we approved that comprehensive plan, and a lot of the data centers, a lot of the changes, all these wholesale changes in land use without even considering the impacts to the watershed. And what's going on with the watershed? Increased salinity. We are reaching the critical stage. This is the EPA advisory threshold. We're above it most of the year. And this is the taste threshold, when the whole water starts tasting salty. The salinity of the reservoir has been rising over time, and it's not going to quit. The rising salt in the reservoir is primarily from the watershed runoff. That's salting roads. During wet weather, it all gets flushed in. During dry weather, you've got the salt coming from UOSA, because we do also drink the recycled water from UOSA. Sodium concentrations in the reclaimed water are actually higher than in the watershed, but there's so much less of it. The watershed is the bulk of the water being delivered to the Occoquan. But as you add more and more roads, you get more and more road salt. You also get less and less flow. And the only way to remove salt from the drinking water supply is to invest not $500 million, that's for the PFAS, but to invest $1 to $2 billion into desalination equipment. And the operating costs for it are in the tens of millions of dollars a year. And guess who gets to pay for it? All the ratepayers in Prince William County, as well as the other ratepayers for Fairfax Water. Okay, so back to the reservoir. Back to the watershed. So here we are. Here's Lake Manassas off at the top of Broad Run, Cedar Run. And so this is basically the major rivers in the Occoquan watershed. Kettle Run is a tributary to Broad Run, which is in itself the major tributary to the Occoquan River. So the Occoquan watershed is often described as the most urbanized watershed in the nation. Think about that for a minute. Certainly, There are far more urbanized areas in the United States than Prince William County. The thing is, they don't have functioning watersheds. During their growth and development, the cities across the nation, from New York to Los Angeles to Philadelphia through Baltimore, Washington, they confined, subsumed, filled in estuaries and killed their watersheds. They destroyed them. I mean, Washington, D.C. was once a functioning watershed. People drank the water. No more. Scientists have found that when 5 to 10% of a watershed is developed, it begins to die, but can still be restored for a while. If urban land use, and that's that suburban land, exceeds the tipping point, and there's still some dispute as to what that tipping point is, water quality no longer responds to restoration measures. Once you destroy a watershed, we don't know how to restore it. It's gone. Before we do irreversible harm to the ecology of our regional drinking water supply, we need to look at what the impacts of the plan changes will be to the water supply. The cost to restore the basin, treat the water, is in the billions of dollars, and it will be borne by us. But the future may be too late to protect this essential portion of our water supply. The Occoquan is irreplaceable. It supplies water to 1 million people just about. So here are the flows into the Occoquan, the water balance chart. This is from the Occoquan Watershed Monitoring Lab. So basically, the Bull Run watershed, my watershed, provides 25% of the water. The Occoquan River watershed is 48% of the water that is supplied. So that's the Occoquan River, which has Kettle Run, all of the streams down there. Groundwater and other watersheds provide about 20% of the water, and you also about 6%. Every day, on average, 67 million gallons of water is treated at the Griffith plant from the Occoquan and provided to the residents of Northern Virginia. When you first develop these once open areas, the primary impact is erosion and sediment from pushing around the soil, knocking down the trees. And those are carried by stormwater into the streams, despite sediment fences and everything else. Post-development, the primary impact is increased stormwater volume and velocity that is caused by the removal of the tree canopy. As Supervisor Gordy clearly pointed out, the best way to infiltrate water into the ground is in forested areas. But when you replace the forested area and the open pervious surfaces of plants and grasses with impervious surfaces, such as roads, parking lots, rooftops, driveways, patios, small streams disappear and groundwater recharge is reduced. We're already seeing concerning signs that the physical condition of the watershed tributaries is falling. It's been measured by the stream monitoring program at the Conservation District, and they're not happy about what they're seeing. So here we have the water cycle. As the U.S. Geological Survey points out, nearly all surface water features, streams, lakes, reservoirs, wetlands, estuaries, did I forget anything? I don't think so, interact with groundwater. All water is connected, and it's connected through groundwater. Groundwater flow and storage, once viewed as a static reservoir, are dynamic, living, and continually changing in response to human and climate stresses. Change the land, and you change the quality and quantity of groundwater and stream flow. Land use changes that increase impervious cover more than 5 and 10 to 10%. And we are at 10% in Prince William County overall. Does two things. It reduces the open area for rain and snow to seep into the ground and percolate into the groundwater. And the impervious surfaces cause stormwater velocity to increase, preventing the water from having enough time to percolate into the earth, increasing storm flooding, preventing recharge of groundwater from occurring. So you go from like 25% deep infiltration to, once you are fully urbanized, to about 5%. Your stormwater runoff will get to about 55%. That's why all the streets flood in Alexandria and Arlington. Slowly over time, this will reduce the water supply. Why? As groundwater levels fall, perennial streams that feed the rivers become ephemeral. The groundwater becomes disconnected from the surface water network. And once the hydrology is destroyed by development, it cannot be easily restored, if at all. Dr. Stanley Grant, who is the director of the Occoquan Watershed Laboratory, in giving a talk about 18 months ago to the Board of Supervisors, he made it clear that the emerging water quality issues are a result of the built environment. As we continue to develop the Occoquan watershed, we endanger the sustainability of the water supply for up to 1 million people in Northern Virginia. When the population density increases, the impervious surfaces in a watershed increase. However, the increase is not linear. Once the population density reaches about 100 people per square mile, the rate of increase in the impervious surfaces increases rapidly. It's the hockey stick. This is what will finally turn the most urbanized watershed in the United States into a memory and leave us without this resource. We need to take care of it. That's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Before moving on to the next presentation, I would, since I have you, Elizabeth, Blake asked, just to put a little finer point to it, what does destroying the watershed mean? Is there water still present? In what sense does the watershed become destroyed?
Okay, so you go into Arlington, you go into Philadelphia, there is water still present. Hang on. Here we are. There's the water. It's still present. They bring flooding, and this flooding picks up oil and grease, dirt, all the contaminants, and it pulls it into the storm transports, which are sometimes the old stream beds, sometimes they're culverts, and it has to move somewhere to get off the street. So the water is still present, but it becomes not particularly useful. It's episodic because it only happens when it rains. Streams do not flow. What happens is this. Perennial streams stop flowing. They disconnect from the groundwater. And so between rainstorms, you don't have any flow in the streams. And so you only get water when it rains. Does that answer it?
Yeah. Ashley slightly misread my question. I said, yes, there is water present. And what you've done is you've updated my definition that I've had in the back of my head of a watershed. There's still an area, the geographical area where the water flows to the ocean. And in one sense, that's a watershed, but it's not a very useful watershed because it's been destroyed.
It just becomes storm drains.
Got it. Thank
It's
you.
not useful at all. I mean, just look at Washington, D.C. They flood, and they put in green infrastructure to try to not have to build quite so many tunnels so they don't overwhelm Blue Plains. But nonetheless, it's not really a watershed anymore. It's just an area.
Yeah, and that water, that runoff, that would be very, very, very expensive to clean to make it drinkable, even when it is available.
It's also very expensive in property damage.
Yeah.
Episodic flooding, constant episodic flooding, very expensive.
Yeah. Looking at the time, Supervisor Gordy, I did want to just go back to one of these questions, since I know that you have to hop off. If you could answer a little bit about what is known about who will own the Burnside farm after the development under the current proposal?
So as folks know, Mark Granville Smith currently owns Burnside Farm. It's leased by the Dollies. I think the Dollies want to be able to purchase it, but that's something that they would have to work out with Mark Granville Smith. As part of the proffers, the Burnside Farm will go under conservation easement so that it cannot be developed going forward. They would give up those development rights as it becomes under that conservation easement. But who owns the land going forward? I know there's a negotiation going on between the Dollies and Mark, but I don't know when or if that transaction will ever occur.
All right, thank you. Dr. Jack, I see your hand raised. Can you hold your question until after our last presentation, or does it need to be now?
Well, I was just going to comment just briefly that such things as BMPs become very important. But as Elizabeth said, as you increase the impervious surface, the challenges become quite overwhelming. So one has to balance things out. But providing BMPs for stormwater, looking for contiguous green space. And as Supervisor Gordy said, forest cover is great because it provides the opportunity to recharge the groundwater and thereby restoring, if you will, the integrity of the watershed. So it's part of the package that needs to be looked at. There are many, many more points that could be raised, but I'll defer all that to when we have
Yeah,
some other
we'll get into it.
Yeah, but
after the
BMPs
last.
are important. And by the way, integrated pest management, looking for ways to have green space more green is very important too, because we have to look at invasive aspects with wildlife, plants, etc., etc., etc. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dr. Jack. Now let's learn a little bit more of the details of the proposal, and I'll pass it on to Vida Carroll with CABSA, who will be providing an overview of that. So Vida, if you want to share your screen, you can take it away.
Yes, let me try to get to my slide.
Vida, I'm not sure if it was you or me that froze. So while hopefully Vida will come back to us here shortly. Oh, here we go. I just re-admitted her, but
hey, I don't know what happened. Let me try that again.
all right, take two.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Can you see that, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. There we go. All right. I'm Vida Carroll with CABSA, which is the Civic Association of Brentsville and surrounding areas. And I am a Nokesville resident. I'm on the Parks and Recreation Commission for Brentsville right now. I used to be on the Architecture Review Board, and now I am involved in CABSA leadership with Angela Klein and Jenny Osborne, and I live in the Vint Hill area. So this is my community and my neighborhood, and I love it here. I love Prince William County. So first, I'm going to go into the 3 applications that are coming before the Planning Commission next week, but I wanted to start with an overview, the comprehensive land plan. And the comp plan, Supervisor Gordy referenced it, and Ashley referenced it a little bit, but the current comp plan was adopted in 2022. And what it does is it earmarks every inch of land in the county for different use: industrial, parks and open space, public land, retail, business, suburban neighborhood, residential neighborhood, all kinds of things. But something special that we're going to talk about, which Ashley alluded to, was in 2022, a new land designation was added, which was conservation residential. And the building blocks for conservation residential were in that rural preservation study in 2019, but it wasn't implemented till 2022. And the other important thing that the comp plan did was it opened up the entire county for utility expansion, which is sewer and water. So before, the rural crescent was that crescent of rural space from Bull Run Mountain down to Quantico that before no utilities were allowed in. And that really protected the rural space from high density development. And that was taken away in the comp plan. But what wasn't taken away in the comp plan was most of the rural designation. You can still really see the rural crescent shape on the comp plan. But it just looks a little bit different. So by adding in the utility expansion, that just formally changed the rural crescent. So I want to get into conservation residential and what it is and what it should be. And it's everything on my slides is pretty much from the county website or the comp plan itself. And CR is described as residential developments characterized by compact development patterns that really cluster that development on a limited footprint. And the intent is to permanently conserve all that land. So here, let's say this is from the comp plan. If you see a 100-acre parcel, it has about like 20 homes, clustered, and then the rest of that land is open. Whereas maybe now you'd see 10 homes on 10-acre lots spread out throughout. This really preserves that open space and the natural resources for everyone. Some of these things were in the 2019 rural preservation study and some of them weren't, but what was adopted was the assemblages have to be a minimum of 40 acres. There's kind of 2 levels of density, 1 per 2 acres or 2 per 1 acre. The idea is it's going to cluster homes together to minimize site disturbance. And it's going to have a restricted buffer. There should be visual buffers to screen development from the surrounding rural area, and there should be natural buffers around the resource protection areas. The open spaces should be contiguous, they should be connected, they should not really be disturbed by the developed areas. It could be wooded land, parks, ag fields, meadows, natural resources, blueways, historic resources, that type of thing. And this is a picture of Preserve at Long Branch, which you can say a lot about it, but what I wanted to showcase here was how the development was concentrated on a smaller set of acreage within the larger parcel, and the open space was contiguous and undisturbed. So the Vint Hill Small Area Plan, which Supervisor Gordy also referenced, was adopted in 2025. And while it hasn't really taken off and there haven't been any charrettes, the idea of the small area plan is that it's going to give the county and the community and the consultants, all parties involved, the chance to thoughtfully develop this area because there's so much development coming in. It'll give us a chance to look at what areas do we want to preserve, where should intersections be fixed, where should the trail network be, where should the schools go, fire and rescue, you know, where should the density be, what should this all look like, and really make a smart plan for this area. And ideally, this small area plan would then guide development. You know, with every development package, with every rezoning, comes a set of proffers, which is usually monetary or land donations towards the county with the intent of covering those infrastructure costs and needs that the development is imposing onto the area. But what is really special about the Vint Hill area is that it's a rural area. It's a transition area. And the infrastructure costs are just the infrastructure needs are just way higher than another part of the county, like the Sudley corridor, where, you know, the roads are in place. A lot of things are already in place. You know, there may need to be fixed up or revisited. But out here, we're really, I mean, as Supervisor Gordy referenced, two of the Reed and Lonesome are both dirt roads. So, I mean, there's really a lot of infrastructure needed. So the Vint Hill Small Area Plan goes from the golf course, which is the green parks and open space you see on the left side of the map. The green is parks and open space. And it goes all the way down to the Grizzlies field, which is on the right side of your map, the parks and open space down on the right. And at the Grizzlies field, there's also land there that was set aside for a middle school owned by Prince William County. And that land, the Grizzlies field and the school land, was proffered when Avondale was built. So that's just important to keep in mind as we're talking about schools and development in this small area plan. And so this mostly includes the undeveloped land to the south of Vint Hill, and then also that land to the north of Vint Hill, which used to be, you know, the transition between the developed area and the rural crescent. Now it's that darker yellow RN residential neighborhood. You can see the conservation residential to the south of Vint Hill, and that's what I'm really going to be focusing on. I tried to overlay this map. It's kind of hard to see, but I really think it's important for you to see the scope of these 7 rezonings that are already in progress. So sorry, it looks a little wonky, but it should give you the idea. There's 7 right now. To the north of Vint Hill, there's Strathmore, Silverbell, Villages at Broad Run, and Greenhaven at Broad Run. And those are all kind of between Silas Drive and then Braemar, pretty much that entirety of that last bit of undeveloped area on the north side of Vint Hill. And then to the south of Vint Hill, there are 3 major projects in the conservation residential area, and they are all being handled by Stanley Martin. And those are the 3 that you see the signage up that have the first public hearing next week. So here's a little bit of a better picture where you can see these a little bit clearer. Okay, so I am going to be kind of focused in, and I'm sorry I'm going so fast, but there's just so much information, and I'm highlighting. I saw a lot of your questions, and I'm really trying to highlight what I feel is important and relevant to PWCA and the conversation about water and conservation. But it's not going to cover everything. I mean, these projects are huge. So with that, the 3 Stanley Martin projects are about 1,100 acres in total. and just over 1,000 units total. There's a major one at Rollins Ford Road on the farm, the old farm there, which is 429 units. The one Alderwood is kind of in the middle, and it goes all the way back to Kettle Run. It's bordered by Kettle Run in the south, and then same with Hawthorne at Kettle Run. That's going to be up near Patriot and includes Burnside, and then goes back down to Kettle Run. And okay, so I am going to start by going through development by development, and again, I'm going to keep it broad, but I'm going to keep it broad, and questions I can answer. Okay, so I'm starting with Hawthorne. This is the project that is closest to Patriot High School. So hopefully on this map, you can see Patriot High School right there, kind of right in the middle, public lands, PL, and T Clay, of course. And that hopefully can give you a point of reference. And I know this map is a little hard to read, but the reason I chose this map specifically is because it shows the environmental resource protection overlay. And it cuts through the southern side of this application, which is a 461 acre application, 233 units. This is the least dense of the 3 applications. That blue ERPO through the south side of the project is Kettle Run, which feeds into Broad Run, and that's kind of the back side of the small area plan. Okay, so this is the schematics from the application, and Vint Hill Road is that artery you see on your left side of the screen. And that big white rectangle to the left top of the screen is the school site, Patriot and T Clay. So you can see right off the bat that most of the development here is clustered towards the road, towards the front of the project, which is a positive. That's how conservation residential should look. It should be clustered. You know, it's often referred to as clustered development, and here you do see that there's a large diagonal kind of through the project, and that's the gas easement, potentially a power line easement one of these days too. And then there's another section of housing in the back. And I want to talk about Land Bay D, which is Burnside Farm. That's the large blue teal parcel on the top of your page. And everyone here is familiar with Burnside Farm. And I want to commend the applicant here because this is what the project, you know, does right. Here it's conserving our ag tourism treasures in Brentsville. And the plan is, you know, it will be in a deed restriction or into a permanent conservation easement. And then, yes, it will be held privately. And continued to be farmed and continued to be Burnside Farm, which is a positive. And this is in the application an ag conservation resource area. And then they have this forested conservation resource area, which is the green that you see on the map. And you see that green kind of starts up near Vint Hill Road, and it's on the bottom side of this map, and it goes all the way to the right to a large swatch Land Bay C. And I think somebody mentioned they live down back on this side behind Burnside. And so Land Bay C is actually 54 acres. It's I think it's a parcel just south of Kettle Run. And it's actually all going to be transferred over to Prince William County parks. Potentially, I'm not really sure the purpose, if it's just going to be held as land, parks and open space, potential, you know, it would have access to the stream if there's going to be passive trails one day through it. But right now, it's just going to be transferred as the raw land to Prince William County Parks. So if you live back there near Burnside, you know, presumably, ideally, both of these lands, one will be held by county parks, and then Burnside ideally will be in a permanent conservation easement, albeit under private ownership. But what this application does really nicely is it preserves the tree cover, the tree cover throughout Land Bay C, all the green. Most of that is the tree cover that's in this parcel. And it also preserves Burnside, which is one of our ag treasures in Brentsville. So those are some positives there. Moving on to Alderwood, which is 335 acres, 397 units, so definitely a higher density. This one goes from Vint Hill back to Kettle Run, and it abuts Lonesome Road, where, if anyone's familiar, where Kettle Run goes over under Lonesome. That's kind of the back of this parcel. And you can see the Kettle Run blueway, the ERPO going through the back side, the south side of this project. So this project, we're going to rotate clockwise, and Vint Hill is going to be on the right side of your screen. You can see it there, and then Kettle Run is going to be on the left side of your screen. So here, first off, you see a lot more density, and this one it's more dense. This transect of conservation residential, they're allowed more density. And some positives about this site are that there is a large amount of tree cover and open field for a potential ag use preserved in Parcel D, which will also protect the Kettle Run blueway, as it's not just that RPA of Kettle Run that they're protecting. It's all this Parcel D is going to be either in deed restriction or conservation easement, and it's still going to be privately held, similar to Burnside, but you know, the way hopefully it all shakes out, it will be protected. And then let me point out at the bottom, the white parcel, Parcel E on the bottom left of your screen, that's going to be dedicated to the county with the presumption that it will be used for a school to be built. And if you remember, the ERPO, the watershed kind of was in the back of this parcel, which it kind of goes on half of the school parcel. So it's you know, the parcel, the fields will probably be on that side and the school closer to the development. But if you notice, it is in the back of the development. In terms of the rest of this project in relation to conservation residential, you'll notice here that on the top side of the map, the way this is rotated, the western side of the parcel, you do see a buffer between the residential area and the rural space. And you see some of the the tree cover saved up near Vint Hill Road. Not all of it, some of it, but what you don't really see is a buffer into the rural space on the bottom side of your map. That's Reed Lane right there. And there really is no buffer between the development cluster and the rural space in this one. So compared to the last one we saw, this is definitely a contrast. Moving on to Longleaf, 327 acres, 429 units, the same density as Alderwood, which we just looked at. This is the one that will have the primary entrance at Rollins Ford Road, and it swings all the way down to Owl's Nest and Silas, which is my personal point of entrance onto Vint Hill Road for reference. And you can see the RPA or the Environmental Resource Protection Overlay going through the property, kind of bisecting it. And this one I want to point out looks a little different off the bat, primarily because the open conservation area is not contiguous. In Land Bay F, or Section F to the right of the map, that is going to be conserved green tree canopy, which is awesome. What I struggle with on this particular parcel or project is you see the RPA, which is outlined in red. That is undevelopable anyway. And what I think ideally would happen in a conservation residential situation that really is in the spirit of conservation is there wouldn't be development between kind of the two arms of RPA, that entire, you know, because the RPA can't be built in regardless. And what we're looking for with what I feel we should be looking for with conservation residential is really going beyond just the minimum, which is, you know, you can't build in the RPA, and really conserving and protecting that land around our RPA, around our blueways, around our natural resources. So, you know, that's one to consider here. It looks a little different than the others in that way. And then similarly, there's minimal buffer to the rural area on the western side of the project, both on the north and southwestern side, and then just along the entire western line. You know, you can see a couple spots where there's the potential for interparcel connectors. There are interparcel connectors, and it does, you know, lead one to wonder, will there be road continuation and encroachment, further encroachment into the rural space? Which I think is a valid question. And, you know, it's not really in the spirit of conservation residential. Conservation residential, per the comp plan, really aims to buffer the residential developable area. So I don't want to take up too much further time, but I did want to touch on the other major issue for a lot of people with this. You know, these projects do a lot of, they've done a lot of good work on these, and they've come a long way as from just where I sit. I think, you know, development sometimes does become a little bit inevitable, and developers can be partners in conservation. And I think with some of these applications, we see that, and with others, we maybe not so much. But I did mention the proffers and heavy infrastructure being needed in the rural area, and the school impact is just massive. So this is with Hawthorne. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm happy to send these out. Alderwood, and then Longleaf. And then I wanted to look at it cumulatively, because another point of struggle for me is that each of these projects looks at school impact one rezoning at a time, but we're not hearing one rezoning at a time. We're having all three come in at once. And so this is the only spot in my presentation where I calculated this information myself. But the cumulative impact on schools from all three of these projects is shown here. And right now, these projects are districted for the Nokesville School and Brentsville District High. And you can see they'll be massively over capacity. And in the application, I do want to point out that there is no monetary proffer for schools. Zero. And what they do proffer is acreage for a school. But you know, that acreage is in the back of the development, which also is a little concerning for me, wondering, would it be built last? You know, can the county really access that site if there's no road there to access it? You know, since the developer is building the development. And then this school impact doesn't include any of the projects on the north side of Vint Hill Road, which of course, these projects, their proffers don't need to include those projects. But it's difficult for me when we look at each project individually, the impact of one project on a school. You can say, okay, well, you know, this one project doesn't impact the school that much. This proffer makes sense. But what we don't do is look at it holistically and see the cumulative impact, which becomes enormous. So again, this is a picture of Vint Hill. And currently, as submitted, in total, the north side of Vint Hill has about 1,300 units in the docket. Of course, that could change, that could go up, down. But just for reference, which is of course it's larger than the three projects to the south of Vint Hill. My one takeaway: without adequate infrastructure, we've got nothing. And whether that infrastructure is paid for by a developer or paid for by county ratepayers across the county, it will need to be built for something of this scale in the rural space. And the question is how to do it smartly. I wouldn't be a civic organization if I didn't remind you to get civically activated. Supervisor Gordy is wonderful, and his email is there. You are more than welcome to, and I encourage you to reach out to him with your thoughts, comments, set up a meeting. Next Wednesday is the Planning Commission public hearing. You can email the clerk your comments. That goes to the entire Planning Commission. You can sign up to speak virtually. You can speak in person. And then this will likely, I'm assuming, go to the board in December. I think that's it for me. Hopefully that was beneficial. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
That's great. Thank you, Vida. I'm Joel Becker. You had a question about schools. Do you wanna, if you're still here, do you wanna unmute and ask your question since Vida was just talking about schools?
Oh yeah, is it in the chat? Oh, I just saw the chat with 21 questions.
Yeah, so he says, how is this going to help the extreme crowding in many local schools like Nokesville School? Anyone who drives by there daily can see all the trailers just added.
Yeah, and actually, could I speak to Nokesville School real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so Nokesville School in the CIP, some of you may realize it's going under a renovation for 10 additional classrooms. Originally, that had been a lot higher. Unfortunately, the sewer line into Nokesville, one of the few spots in the rural space with sewer and utilities, is limited. So they had to scale back the renovation to just 10 classrooms, which when you put on your thinking cap, it sort of leads one to think that the school is probably capped out, not even because of land or space, but simply because of the sewer capacity in town, which is concerning because then when you see these 3 applications at 206, whatever it was, 216% over capacity for elementary school, not even inclusive of the other rezonings. Yeah, I mean, you can redistrict to a point. I think everyone in the area should expect a massive school redistricting, but you can't really redistrict your way out of over 2,000 new homes. And that's a big question.
I'm not sure who iPad is, but your question about how this development might impact you on well water, do you want to unmute and ask your question, which might be for Elizabeth?
Yeah, so this is Laurie Kessler, and I live off Owl's Nest, and we have a well. And with all of this development already, with the data servers that are going in, we've already noticed a change in our well water since we moved here over 10 years ago. So how is this new development going to impact our well? Are we going to be forced to have to go to city or county water? I'm not paying for that. I am perfectly happy on my well with my septic and my 10 acres. And now all of this development is messing with why I moved to this area. So what is going to happen to my well?
Elizabeth, do you want to jump in? I do know that the county is in the process of doing a groundwater study, but I don't think we have.
Maybe. You referred at one point to the Loudon study. Loudon has 20 county wells. That was originally supposed to be 60, but they kind of petered out on it. Prince William County has none. There are 2 USGS wells in the county. One is in Forest Park and one is up the road from me. Its water level is trending downwards. The water is disappearing slowly. But by the way, it's on the Loudoun County border. So when Loudoun County used a USGS well, they cited that well also. And when Fauquier County talked about wells, they cited the same well. There's not a lot of wells out there to monitor this, but you need to monitor it over a long time. What will probably happen is slowly, very slowly, your well will dry up. Yeah, and mine too. The mine is drying up slowly. I sound it every few years to see what the water level is at the same time of each year. I probably should do it every year to get more pictures. But yeah, the groundwater level is falling. In my well and in the only monitoring well in Western Prince William County. The reason we've seen some of the creeks here dry up in the last few summers is because the groundwater is falling and is disconnected from the stream flow. That's generally an indication that we're losing our groundwater. It'll be restored in a wet year, but not enough. It will continue to fall. So we really need those monitoring wells.
So in essence, what is the answer? If my well dries up, like you say your well is drying up, does that mean I, the taxpayer, now have to pay to have either a new well dug or pay to get linked into the county water?
Yeah,
That's not right. That's not
that's
right.
pretty much how it works.
It isn't right. And, you know, there was just a study out of Loudon that I should try to send out where they studied kind of what is happening to groundwater in rural Loudon. And it's pretty interesting and it's pretty disturbing. And what's also disturbing is we get a lot of our water, if you're on utilities, from the same source as Loudon, and that's the Potomac, the western side of this county. And yeah, with the industrial water usage and growth, you know, water is not a renewable resource, and
Is a finite resource.
right, you can't just make more of it. So I wish I had an answer for you. And I wish I do think if you're on Owl's Nest there, pushing for, you know, true rural buffers per the comp plan, between the developed space and the rural space. That's in line with the comp plan. And that's what conservation residential should look like.
Diane Nelson, do you want to come in and ask your question about proffers?
Yeah, I've got a dog in the house. You might hear a lot of noise, but yeah, I was wondering if their areas are going to be green space and be kept as, you know, healthy green spaces, then a lot of the invasives are going to need removed, and that can require specialty resources.
Coming in and out a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Okay. Might be my connection. Are you able to read it for me, Ashley? Or
Sure. So Diane asks, and this might be for Chris or some others, can proffers include the cost of removing invasive plants, trees from the area that will remain open and green space to help native plants return to help support the watershed?
Chris, are you on?
Yeah, so this is Chris Carroll, the Planning Commissioner for Brentsville. So, Diane, I'd have to take a look at what exactly the proffers state in terms of that. I know for new plantings that they're kind of required to stick to, I believe, a certain percentage of native plants that are going in. In terms of kind of the cleanup of already existing areas, that's something I would have to double check and see if they are proffering anything to that or if anything's required on that front.
Thanks, Chris.
One little point on that, there's something called the edge effect. First 500 feet in a woodland is where invasives attack. So if you restore woodland, remove all the invasives, you have to keep doing it. You can't just do it once. And there's a slight tendency to knock everything down and plant some trees because, well, hey, they were all choked out with invasives. But if you don't have more than 500 feet of woodland width and the RPA is not that thick, you're just going to have to constantly deal with the invasives. It just happens. It's the edge effect to a woodland.
Just trying to scroll through here. Liz, did you want to come in and share your comment or ask your question? Liz Croner. Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, there you are.
Would say is that
You're a little hard to hear. You might want to speak directly into where your microphone is.
from the Trails and Blueways Council, we're concerned with all the things that were brought up here, but also the fact that there's a whole lot of people being introduced into an area with I think there's a Safeway near there, basically there's nothing within walking distance or biking distance. So we're trying to make sure that they have trails, that they're planning connectivity in between the developments, and that they're trying in terms of bike ped connectivity, and also that the schools, the Kettle on Kettle Run Road have some ways for people to get to the schools, for children to get to the schools, maybe without school buses. So we've been looking at those kinds of connections between the developments, and with some success, but not as good as they could be. So I think it could be better.
Chris or Vida, do you have any comments?
Chris, do you have any comments on trails?
No, I mean, I would just say that, there's an extensive trail system being proffered in all three applications. And right now they do have in the widening for Vint Hill, because right now they're preferring to widen Vint Hill from Sudley Manor all the way down to Owl's Nest and Silas Drive, which they are right now proposing to reconfigure to align those two roads and put in a traffic circle. And on both sides of Vint Hill, there will be a shared use path that will travel that entire way. But there are trail systems and trails kind of in all three apps that go around to help promote some of that connectivity, especially kind of down near Kettle Run, to work on that greenway, so to speak, and try to promote the connectivity between all those apps, the applications, to make a kind of unique trail system for the area and the development that's coming.
Oh, that's good. And I'm hoping that the greenway that's planned along Kettle Run will also, that you'll make sure that the connections go all the way to Reed Lane and Kettle Run Road and Lonesome Road, so that, because those green spaces are supposed to be open to the general public as part of the conservation residential promise. And so I'm hoping that those that there will be access into those green spaces for other people in the community. It's not just, for the residents themselves.
Liz, yeah, almost all of the land back by Kettle Run on both Alderwood and Hawthorne applications is going to be in that open green forested or agricultural open space. And even the portions that are privately held in conservation easement or deed restriction, they're going to have easements for the trails. So you will be able to get from follow Kettle Run from Lonesome to Reed. You'll have to go a little bit down Reed, pick up the trail again, and then go all the way to Kettle Run at Burnside. That is the way I understand it, what is happening. So that is there. And then along Vint Hill, there'll be the shared use path from Sudley Manor to Owl's Nest. And then along the utility easement on Vint Hill, it's owned by Manassas City, but hopefully we could get some sort of natural trail over that utility easement to just get that last little leg up
the leg
Vint
that
Hill.
goes up to Rollins Ford.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then then the one other thing, and this is on the for the developments on the other side of Vint Hill, on the more
North
side, is of course we want people to be able to get to Broad Run and to be proffering Greenway along Broad Run. So that's another important thing to keep a lookout for in all the developments there.
100%.
Cindy, do you want to come in and ask your question on the vehicles? Or the yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, are there predictions on number of vehicles generated per development? And has anything been done or talked about with road expansion? Because if they're all going to be heading to the main arteries for jobs, we've already got challenges on those roads.
Yeah, so Chris, do you know if there's been any studies done, like traffic analysis?
Yeah, so thanks, Ashley, and thanks, Cindy, for the question. So, there's definitely been traffic studies done, and traffic impact analysis. That was all included as part of the application and done by the transportation staff, kind of in conjunction with VDOT. They both review the applications, provide comments, and go through a couple different iterations. In terms of the exact numbers of vehicles that are planned, if you shoot me an email, I can definitely follow up on that and pull that up. Unfortunately, I don't have that handy right now on what those exact numbers are. But like I said earlier, a lot of the improvements primarily are focused on Vint Hill. They are widening it, like I said earlier, from Silas Drive, Owl's Nest, down to Sudley Manor. They are going to kind of ease the curve, kind of closer to Rollins Ford. There's that kind of distinct sharp curve that they're going to be lessening, making a little less steep right there. And then they also are kind of looking at the intersection on Vint Hill to go on to 28. Now, beyond that, I don't know what exactly transportation has looked at and reviewed in terms of those cars, where they are going beyond, say on 28 or on 29 or on 66. But kind of in the immediate area, they are looking at some improvements to help with that increased traffic load.
Chris, can you put your email in the comments?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm assuming when VDOT looks at the projects, they're all looked at independently rather than in aggregate, right?
So these three projects have actually, these three in conjunction with the projects on the north side of Vint Hill, they've actually all been working together on this transportation issue, the Vint Hill kind of concern, and they've kind of put together a draft joint development authority or joint development agreement, a JDA, which basically they've been working with county transportation staff to form this agreement to basically cover all the different scenarios. Like if all the projects got approved, what would the developers pay for and complete? If only a couple of the projects got through, what would they go through and complete, pay for? Or say only one of the projects got approved, like what improvements would they do? And then what would they then pay for? So they have kind of been going through all that with the county, and that also is tied to different phase-ins, based on where they are in terms of units and when those different improvements would be needed and required. So they are, I can't speak to what the total cost is or what share they are paying, but they have been working collaboratively to put this road kind of situation all in tandem and find kind of a common ground solution.
Thank you.
If anyone has a comment or a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. Not seeing anything currently. I think just a follow-up question on the road widening and who would pay for the road expansion.
Yeah, I mean, everything, again, I hope if there's one takeaway, it's not, this should not, if you live in the area or if you don't live in the area and you have concerns about school overcrowding in Brentsville, or you have concerns about your costs as a taxpayer across the county, you should go look at the applications yourself and read the traffic analysis, read the staff report, see what the plan is or lack of plan is for schools, and find if you live off Vint Hill, find your point of access off Vint Hill and look at it and say, okay, when I make a left, is this going to be safe? Because these are 3 huge projects. I am a total just volunteer. Chris is the planning commissioner, also a volunteer. We have 5 little kids. Ashley is amazing, doing everything with PWCA, and Elizabeth is amazing. But, it's on as the community, take a look, see how it looks, read through it, and formulate your own questions too, and bring them, because there is a lot of good that has been done in this project from where it started towards now. And I think there's a lot of positives, but then there's a lot of questions that remain. And there's a lot of things that could be done a little bit better. So I encourage you to kind of do that homework as well.
Yeah, when we can provide some of those links when we when we send out a follow-up email. So
and I'm happy to email my slides as well.
Perfect. I'm going to go to Dr. Jack, and then Mary Beth Shaw had a question. So Dr. Jack, if you want to come in.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Ashley. This has been very helpful. When I saw the collective developments on the Planning Commission agenda, it just made my mind was racing as to the change. So if you take a 50,000-foot view and look back to why we had the rural crescent, one of the rationales was, of course, to protect the water supply. And protecting the water supply means protecting the recharge areas for groundwater as well. But another mantra of the rural crescent was the infrastructure impacts of more development, higher density development on roads, schools, services. All of that was part of that mantra that, Kim and others brought to the table to remind people what we were saving was our rural area and ag economy, rural way of life, choices that people have, that we, in Prince William County, when you talk about, the different types of communities we have that, includes tidal wetlands to the mountains. Um, it we have choice here with the rural area. Having said that, we have so many things that need to be addressed collectively in these packages. For instance, I'll just say contiguous green space is really important. When we were dealing with Cherry Hill in the eastern end, the developer had proffered green areas, so the percentage of green space was a decent percentage. But when we looked at it, and Kim Hosen was at the meetings we had with Locapelt when we sat down with Lacey Compton of Compton and Dooling, representing the applicant. But we said, wildlife are going to have to get wings because those fingers, green space, are not connected. So we said, it was like a light bulb went off in Lacey's brain. And he said, oh, you want me to connect? Yes, wildlife can't hop that much, to get from one place to another. So contiguous green space is really important. That is, we need wildlife corridors. And it goes on. Not only do we need BMPs, but we need low impact development. We need to have also some respect for the appreciation for what we have with the wildlife. If we don't chase them away, we need to maybe provide wildlife observations areas. We need to maybe have, the school's impact blows off the charts too, but we need nature learning areas for our children and adults, and we need a lot of this. We need wellness trails, not just meandering trails. We need so many things. Now, one of the things that we did in the eastern end with Westridge, when we were trying to keep a rural flavor, we used something that was used in Chesterfield County toward Richmond and Williamsburg, and that is rolled curbs and gutters, because that provides, by incorporating the density that we have here is off the charts. But having said that, where you can bring your treescape down as much as possible to the road space, then you need to incorporate designs such as rolled curbs and gutters so that you preserve some of that rural character. And that's what we were trying to do. And we did somewhat successfully in Westridge when we were developing that. But we spent a lot of time on trails in there because part of it was, how does it fit in the big picture sense? And we have a McCourt to Occoquan Trail where Westridge, we had them proffer to build part of that trail. So he would, the list goes on. So I just want to say there's a lot more conversation that has to take place. So with that, I probably took more time than I should, but biking and hiking access, and has anybody brought up the question about equestrian areas? Where is that appropriate and where should it be in the rural space as we transform this beautiful rural area into some other vision, and so all of that has to be in play. And of course, preserving and respecting ag economy, the rural space, being smart about clustering. being smart
Absolutely.
about LED design. Smart growth principles need to be here, and the list goes on. So let me
Yep.
leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jack.
I hope that helps. Yikes. Okay.
I'll
Okay.
pass
Thank
it
you.
on. Mary Beth, did you have a comment still or a question?
Not so much a question as a comment, because I've watched over the years Loudoun County, which is not my favorite county, but I have admired that one of the things that they require is, as development progresses, things in one land bay have to be totally completed, including all of the proffers have to be completed at the point before a developer will be given permission to move on to the next one, which means the school has to be built, the roads have to be in place, trails which are not running alongside major roadways, they are actual trails, are incorporated. And I have advocated for that as something that Prince William should try to incorporate as well. And I haven't looked close at the plan, so I don't know whether there is a phasing development that would ensure. I've seen too many broken promises here in Prince William County that, for example, Rollins Ford Road was originally supposed to have been completed by the developer. They were let off the hook and taxpayers paid for it. And that is just one example of many. And I just don't want to continue to see that.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Beth. And Kevin, did you want to share your comment? All right, I think we're wrapping up here. I do want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and to Supervisor Gordy for his opening remarks, and everyone for coming here and learning about this proposal. As Vida mentioned, this is going to the Planning Commission next Wednesday, and you will have an opportunity to dig into this proposal a little bit further. Perhaps there's some additional questions that you have based on these presentations tonight, and you can dig into those a little bit further and provide some additional comments or have some additional questions for the public hearing next Wednesday. But I think, it is important to remember that, the density range is for conservation residential is pretty wide, and it does not have to necessarily be at that higher end, especially since it's so far away from mass transit, like what we recommend in our 3Rs smart growth vision. And really looking at this through that cumulative impact lens and the impacts of impervious surface. So again, thank you very much. Oh, and yeah, and so with that, I will leave you to get back to your evening, and I'll be publishing this. Hopefully I'll be able to do that tomorrow, and I'll send out an email to everyone that registered once that is published for anyone to review the presentation, and I'll provide some additional links to the proposals as well. All right, have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.